Have you ever witnessed a betrayal so brazen it could shatter every illusion of a perfect marriage in a single heart-stopping moment? This is the story of Elisa and Richard Davenport, a golden couple whose radiant smiles and lavish lifestyle mask dark secrets of deceit. One unsuspecting day, Elisa stumbles upon an email confirming a 5-star hotel suite booking for a woman who is most certainly not her. Fueled by heartbreak and a thirst for justice, Elisa hatches a plan that turns a secret rendezvous into the stage for a masterful takedown. Get ready for scandal legal battles and the ultimate revenge. Elisa Davenport believed her life was a fairy tale, an opulent one at that. Born Elisa Bellini, she hailed from an Italian-American family known for its thriving export business in the California wine country. In her early 20s, she dazzled at a Napa Valley charity gala in a designer gown that shimmered like captured moonlight. Among the array of international socialites, she caught the eye of Richard Davenport, a venture capitalist who collected upscale restaurants and boutique hotels like children collect baseball cards. They were an instant power couple, handsome, wealthy, and revered by the upper crust of California society. For years, Elisa adored her husband's ambition and enthusiasm. Richard's sharp suits, his disarming grin, and his powerful presence at networking events seemed evidence of a dedicated partner. Each year on their anniversary, he gifted Elisa a new piece of diamond jewelry. "Adding a sparkle to the sparkle of my life," he would joke. Their combined names were often dropped in local publications praising their philanthropic endeavors and red carpet appearances. Yet beneath the facade of gracious elegance, Elisa had begun to sense little disruptions in the stability of their marriage. Often Richard would return from business trips with lips sealed about the details of his endeavors. He would shrug off her questions, attributing his secrecy to NDA-bound acquisitions. At first, Elisa tried to remain trusting, reminded of how fiercely he worked to maintain their lifestyle. But each time she saw him sneak a quick text at dinner or hush his phone calls, the moment she walked into a room, the knots in her stomach grew tighter. She brushed them aside, telling herself that any man balancing a multi-million-dollar empire would crave privacy. Little did she know that the truth was about to unravel, opening a Pandora's box of betrayal that no carefully managed image could hide. In the Davenport home, an architect's masterpiece overlooking the rugged coastline of Carmel by the sea, Elisa's days were typically filled with philanthropic tasks, interior decorating projects, and hosting visiting friends. But one rainy afternoon, as thunder rattled the giant bay windows, she decided to check her personal email. She navigated the usual flurry of charity invites, brand collaborations, and courtesy notes from acquaintances. Tucked between a digital receipt for an online shoe purchase and an evite to a wine tasting was a forwarded email she hadn't noticed before. The subject line read, "Sweet Confirmation, the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay." At first she assumed it might relate to Richard's business. After all, hotel suite reservations were common in their social circle. But curiosity tugged at her. She opened the email to find an exchange between Richard's executive assistant, someone she'd never heard of, a Margaret Ellison, and the reservations team at the Ritz-Carlton. Her heart skittered when she read the details. The suite was reserved in Richard Davenport's name, scheduled for 2 nights that coming weekend. Under the number of guests field, the note read, "Mr. Davenport and Ms. Heather Carlson." That name, Heather Carlson, she had never heard it before, but some primal alarm inside her flared. Elisa's gaze flicked to the next lines. "Special request for chilled champagne upon arrival," a note that read, "Welcome to our secret escape and an upgrade to the best ocean view suite." Her ears began to ring. She realized this was no typical business arrangement. There was an intimacy in the tone that nearly made her sick to her stomach. Elisa read and reread the email, hoping she had misread or misunderstood. In some parallel dimension, perhaps Heather Carlson was a potential investor or board member. But the crisp language of the booking said otherwise. It dripped with romance and secrecy, the sort of indulgent detail a man might arrange only for a lover. A thunderclap outside struck just as her breathing intensified. In that moment, she sensed her marriage was splintering. She turned off her laptop, but the dam had already broken. The suspicion, once merely a whisper, was now a roar that shook the foundations of her reality. That evening, Richard returned from the city. Elisa studied him from the kitchen doorway, her mind racing with how to broach the subject. Do I accuse him outright? Do I pretend to know nothing? Every time she pictured him in that suite with Ms. Heather Carlson, her pulse surged with anger and betrayal. Gathering her nerves, she approached him after dinner. "Richard," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "you have a trip planned this weekend, don't you?" She looked at him intensely, searching for any flicker of guilt. "Yes," he replied casually, swirling a glass of wine in his hand. "I'll be away for a couple of days. Some negotiations for a new restaurant concept." He averted his gaze, focusing on the swirl of red liquid. His tone was too controlled, too measured. Where she pressed, fighting the urge to fling the glass out of his hand. A restaurant. In Half Moon Bay. She injected the location into the conversation, deliberately hoping to spark recognition or even a stammer of confusion. But to her dismay, he remained unreadable. Richard nodded. "Yes, Half Moon Bay. Is there a problem?" His gaze flickered just slightly, an infinitesimal show of tension. Was that flicker guilt? Elisa's throat felt dry. She wanted to hurl that damning email in his face, but a sliver of self-control tugged her back. Something told her that if she played her cards differently, she might learn more. So she forced a small smile and shook her head. "No," she lied smoothly. "I was just curious. You rarely mention your business partners, and I like to know where you are in case I need to reach you." "I'll be fine, darling," he said, kissing her on the cheek. "Don't worry yourself." As he disappeared into his office, Elisa's heart hammered in her chest. She burned with the desire to confront him. But she realized if she did so, he would either lie or scramble to change his plans. Better to be strategic. Better to make a plan of her own. Her first inclination was to call her mother Ariana Bellini, who had a knack for intuitive counsel. But Ariana was in Italy for a family matter, unreachable except by sporadic international calls. Instead, Elisa dialed the number of her closest friend, Charlotte Harrington. Charlotte was a socialite turned PR consultant with an uncanny ability to ferret out truths hidden behind polished facades. Elisa's voice wavered when her friend picked up. "I've discovered something horrible about Richard. I'm not entirely sure I want to talk about it, but I need someone to listen." Within the hour, Charlotte arrived at Elisa's home. They sat in the living room's plush armchairs beneath a chandelier that cast fractured light across the ceiling. Elise recounted every detail, finding the email, the suspicious name, the confrontation that never quite happened. She opened her laptop and showed Charlotte the forwarded email, which was tangible proof of an affair in the making. Charlotte's expression darkened. He definitely booked a suite for the weekend. With champagne waiting. That's not a business trip, Elisa. There was a weighted silence. Though Charlotte had a biting wit, she spoke gently now. "What are you going to do?" Elisa exhaled, her voice taut. "I want to catch him. I want to show him he can't just do this and expect me to stay clueless, but I don't want to throw him a warning shot until I have a plan." Charlotte rubbed Elisa's shoulder comfortingly. "You need evidence, not just for the sake of confrontation, but in case things get ugly. And darling, you might want to speak with a lawyer, someone who can protect your interests. If you confront him prematurely, he might hide assets or manipulate the situation." At the mention of a lawyer, Elisa stiffened. She had never considered divorcing Richard before, nor had she thought about prenuptial agreements or alimony. To them, divorce was always that unspeakable outcome other couples faced. Yet the bitterness coursing through her veins whispered that perhaps she was on the brink of an unspeakable outcome herself. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "I'll call around tomorrow. But first let me think about how to handle that weekend. I can't just stand by while he lies to my face." That same night, Elisa tossed and turned, haunted by images of Richard in the arms of a faceless blonde named Heather Carlson, sipping champagne against a backdrop of crashing ocean waves. By dawn, she was resolute. She would contact an attorney. She searched through her digital contacts and remembered a name that circulated among her affluent acquaintances. Lisa Bloom, a real-life high-powered attorney known for handling high-stakes cases and women's rights issues. Though Lisa often dealt with media-centric lawsuits, Elisa prayed she might also handle marital and divorce matters, or at least offer guidance. Nervously, Elisa placed the call. To her relief, Lisa Bloom's office was polite and respectful. While Lisa herself was busy, one of her senior partners, a woman named Hannah Schwartz, could meet that very afternoon. Encouraged, Elisa dressed in a crisp white blazer, pinned up her hair, and ventured to Los Angeles to meet at the Bloom firm's elegant suite in Century City. The office exuded a mixture of modern minimalism and quiet power. Tall glass walls overlooked the city skyline. Sleek sofas invited clients to sink in and unburden their woes. Hannah Schwartz, a poised professional in her early 40s, ushered Elisa into a private conference room. She listened intently as Elisa poured out the entire story, her suspicions, the email, the planned rendezvous at the Ritz-Carlton. "This is definitely suspect," Hannah said, tapping a manicured nail against the table. "If you have proof he's committing adultery, it might influence future proceedings, especially concerning spousal support or asset division. But you must handle this carefully. Documentation is vital." "So I've heard," Elisa responded, swallowing nervously. "What would you advise me to do this weekend?" Hannah's eyes gleamed with a lawyer's strategic cunning. "If you want to catch him in the act, you could discreetly gather photos, witness statements, or at least ensure you have a credible timeline of his presence at that hotel with this other woman. But confronting him physically, especially in a public setting, can create complications. Instead, she slid a business card across the table. You might hire a private investigator, someone reputable who can calmly document every moment from check-in to check-out." Elisa nodded, though her chest tightened at the idea of such cloak-and-dagger tactics. She never imagined a world where she would hire a private eye. Her life had been about charity galas, social causes, not covert surveillance of her own husband. But the gravity of the situation weighed on her. If Richard was brazen enough to book a romantic suite with no attempt to hide the name, there was no telling what else he might do. As the meeting ended, Hannah pressed Elisa's hand gently. "Remember, you're not alone. Contact me if you need further guidance, day or night." With that, Elisa stepped out into the corridor. She felt both a sense of relief and a sharp pang of fear. This was real. There was no going back to the unknowing, naive version of herself who believed wholeheartedly in her husband. Returning home, Elisa resolved to act swiftly. Through a recommendation from Charlotte, she contacted a respected private investigator named Martin Delgado, who had worked with top-tier clients in Silicon Valley. Unlike the cliché image of a trench-coated gumshoe, Martin was a polished professional who specialized in corporate espionage and marital infidelity cases for the wealthiest of Californians. He was known for his discretion and thoroughness. Their consultation took place over a quick phone call where Martin assured her that he'd gather enough evidence to confirm the affair. "But what do you want to do with the proof?" Martin's voice was calm yet direct. "Some clients want it for leverage, others want it for divorce proceedings, and some just want closure." Elisa was silent for a moment. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I can't say if I'm ready to end this marriage. But I need the truth, and if I decide to leave, I need to ensure I'm not robbed blind." Martin agreed to tail Richard from the moment he left for Half Moon Bay. Meanwhile, Elisa waited. She busied herself with phone calls to philanthropic partners, occupying her mind with the usual tasks, organizing a fundraising dinner for a children's hospital, reviewing the menu for an upcoming arts benefit. It felt surreal to carry on with her social obligations, smiling politely while inside she was unraveling. On Friday morning, Richard left the house with a suitcase and a garment bag. "Don't wait up," he told Elisa, pressing a perfunctory kiss to her cheek. "This might run longer than a weekend." "I'll try to be back Sunday night." Elisa managed a tight nod. She wanted to scream, "How dare you lie to me?" Instead, she forced a polite smile. "All right, dear. Good luck." The moment his car disappeared down the driveway, Martin Delgado's team began their surveillance. And so the countdown began to what Elisa anticipated would be the biggest confrontation of her life. Saturday morning, Elisa's phone buzzed. A text from Martin. "They checked in last night. She's definitely not a business associate." Short but damning, the message came with a photo attachment showing Richard exiting his Aston Martin, accompanied by a tall blonde woman in a fitted red dress and sky-high Louboutin heels. The next photo showed them at the Ritz-Carlton's front desk, Richard's hand on the small of her back. The images were heartbreakingly explicit in their implication. Elisa stared at them, her heart twisting in fury and sorrow. She noticed how Richard leaned in intimately, how the woman Heather Carlson presumably looked up at him with admiring eyes. They were the picture of an in-love couple about to embark on a romantic getaway. Another text. Dinner in the hotel restaurant tonight. I'll keep you updated. Elisa felt tears prickling her eyes. She had dreaded this confirmation, yet part of her had held onto a shred of hope that maybe the email was some elaborate misunderstanding. Now there was no denying the truth. A swirl of questions infected her mind. Who was Heather Carlson? Where had Richard met her? How long had this affair been going on? Sinking onto the velvet couch in her living room, she buried her face in her hands. Anger pushed grief aside, leaving her with a single desire. She wanted Richard to face consequences. He had taken her for a fool, booked a suite a mere hour's drive away from their home, as if inviting discovery. Now she intended to deliver that discovery in a way he'd never forget. That evening, Elisa called Hannah Schwartz again. She described the photographic evidence, her burning fury, and her desire to confront Richard. But Hannah, ever the cool strategist, offered an alternative plan. Confront him, but do it with a purpose. Hannah suggested, voice emanating calm authority through Elisa's speakerphone. Why not show up unannounced with legal counsel? It'll drive home the seriousness of what he's done. Elisa's mind whirled at the audacity of such a move. So, I would arrive at the suite with you by my side, or a fellow attorney from your firm. Precisely, Hannah replied. It might be even more impactful if you yourself remain poised, letting him see that you aren't acting rashly but have the support of a skilled legal team. It'll show you mean business, no pun intended. The more Elisa listened, the more she realized how perfect it sounded. A wave of empowerment coursed through her. This was no longer about playing a scorned wife. This would be a carefully orchestrated chess move. Let's do it, she said firmly. Early Sunday morning, the plan took shape. Martin Delgado's updates indicated that Richard was planning a leisurely checkout sometime after brunch. That gave Elisa and Hannah time to assemble a mini legal entourage. The team would arrive at the Ritz-Carlton, request a courtesy from management, someone Hannah knew personally, and proceed to the suite. If everything aligned, they would catch Richard and Heather on their way out, or still in the suite. Either way, the element of surprise would be guaranteed. Sunday noon. The Ritz-Carlton, Half Moon Bay. The property's elegant facade stretched along a clifftop overlooking the Pacific. Elisa wore a black sheath dress, demure but impeccably tailored, and her hair was arranged in a sleek chignon. Hannah Schwartz appeared in a pristine navy suit, accompanied by a junior associate to help record details if needed. A quiet confidence radiated from Hannah's every step. At the reception desk, a discreet manager recognized Hannah from a past social event. After a hushed conversation, they agreed to guide Elisa and the legal team toward Richard's Ocean View suite, ensuring no public disturbance. Martin Delgado's text indicated that Richard and Heather were still inside finishing breakfast courtesy of room service. Heart-pounding, Elisa and her entourage made their way through the hushed corridors of plush carpet and gilded sconces. Each step felt heavier than the last. When they reached the door, Suite 412, Elisa paused, drawing a shaky breath. She glanced at Hannah, who offered a reassuring nod. Then Elisa knocked firmly. Inside, muffled voices ceased. A moment later, Richard opened the door. He froze, eyes widening at the sight of Elisa standing there like a dark angel of reckoning, flanked by two lawyers and a manager. Behind him, Heather Carlson stood wrapped in a plush robe, her face registering confusion, then alarm. Elisa, Richard sputtered, stepping partly into the hallway to block her view of Heather. What is this? She held his gaze, heartbreak chiseled into her eyes. I'm here to deliver a legal notice, Richard. She pushed a crisp envelope forward courtesy of Hannah's firm. And also to inform you that I know exactly why you're here. Heather, at the sound of Elisa's voice, hurried into the bedroom area, presumably to dress or hide. The stench of bacon and sweet pastries wafted from a room service cart mixed with the stale perfume of betrayal. Elisa, can we talk about this privately? Richard's voice was strained, desperation flickering across his features. He looked to Hannah and the junior associate as if expecting them to vanish into thin air. I believe you forfeited privacy when you booked this suite, Elisa answered icily. She could feel her composure wobbling under the weight of heartbreak, but she steadied herself. Your lies end here. This envelope contains a formal notification that I'm considering divorce proceedings. My attorney, Ms. Schwartz, will be in touch with your counsel regarding next steps." Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face was a panorama of guilt, shock, and perhaps a tinge of regret. Finally, he managed, "Elisa, let me explain, this isn't what it looks like." A scornful laugh escaped her lips. "Isn't what it looks like, Richard? I have photographic evidence, and I found your sweet confirmation email. Spare me the lies." She pointed toward the room. "Don't keep your mistress waiting." For a moment she thought Richard might argue, but then Heather emerged from the bedroom in street clothes, face flushed with embarrassment. The tension was visceral. The manager, hovering in the background, cleared his throat discreetly, clearly wanting to contain the spectacle. Elisa turned on her heel. "I hope it was worth it," she said, voice trembling with scorn. "Because you just forfeited the only decent thing left in our marriage." And with that, she and her legal entourage swept away, leaving Richard gaping in the open doorway, his affair exposed to the harsh midday sun. The drive back to Carmel by the sea was silent except for the hum of the engine. Elisa's thoughts raced, replaying the confrontation again and again. She couldn't decide if she felt triumphant or utterly shattered. Maybe a bit of both. Once home, she took a scalding shower, trying to wash off the emotional grime of that hotel corridor scene. She wanted to sob, to break down, but a stoic numbness had wrapped itself around her like armor. She texted Charlotte a brief summary. "I confronted him with the lawyer." Heather was there. "It's done." Charlotte replied, "I'm so sorry, E. You did the right thing. Let me know if you need anything. Wine, a shoulder, a punching bag." Meanwhile, Hannah Schwartz emailed Elisa a draft of potential divorce stipulations, encouraging her to read and consider her wishes. Elisa realized she hadn't thought about the practicalities of dividing finances, properties, or even who would keep the Carmel house. The magnitude of it all weighed on her. Then came a new complication that evening. A reporter from a local social column contacted Elisa. Word had leaked someone at the Ritz-Carlton, or possibly a guest recognized them, or perhaps it was simply the unstoppable rumor mill that swirled around wealthy circles. Whispers of Richard's affair and Elisa's dramatic confrontation were already trickling into the social sphere. "Care to comment, Mrs. Davenport?" the reporter asked. Elisa's fingers tightened around her phone. She declined politely, terrified by how quickly her personal crisis was morphing into public gossip. She knew if it escalated, it could threaten her philanthropic endeavors, drag her family name through tabloid mud, and humiliate her further. Was that also part of Richard's game plan, or simply a byproduct of his reckless foolishness? She sank onto a chaise lounge, exhaustion slumping her shoulders. Life as she knew it had changed irrevocably in a matter of days. Now she stood on the precipice of a new future, one where she had to decide whether she still wanted to be Mrs. Davenport at all. As night fell, Elisa's phone rang, the caller ID revealing Richard's personal number. She stared at the screen, adrenaline spiking. After several rings, she picked up, compelled by a need to hear what pathetic explanation he might attempt. "Elisa," he began, his voice subdued. "I'm back in town. Can we talk?" "Why should I?" she snapped, though part of her yearned for some closure. "Because I need to explain," he said, almost pleading. "Please just give me the courtesy of hearing me out." Against her better judgment, she relented. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, the lounge of the Bernardus Lodge, an upscale resort in Carmel Valley that was usually quiet on Sunday nights. Elisa arrived first, seating herself in a corner booth. She'd changed into a simple black sweater and jeans, her face devoid of the usual elaborate makeup. Richard showed up minutes later, looking disheveled in a rumpled button-down. He sat down, trying to catch her gaze, but she stared at the table. "I messed up," he began in a thick voice. "I'm not going to insult you by denying it." "A little late for honesty, don't you think?" Elisa retorted, the bitterness in her tone a shield for her wounded heart. "How long has this been going on, Richard?" He exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "A few months," he confessed. "I met Heather at a networking event. It started off casual. Then it spiraled into booking romantic weekend getaways," she clarified, venom in her voice. "I'd ask why, but I'm not sure I care to know." He stared at her eyes, flickering with regret. "We've been drifting apart. I was stressed with acquisitions, you were busy with your charities. It's not an excuse, but it happened. And I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, or for it to get out of hand." For a moment, Elisa almost felt pity. The vulnerability in his voice tugged at her. Yet she recalled the image of him with his hand on Heather's back. The damage was done. "Well, you did hurt me," she said, voice shaking. "And now we have to deal with the fallout. I've spoken to a lawyer, Richard, a real powerhouse. This might end in divorce." He swallowed, face draining. "Can we fix this? If we can keep it out of the media, keep it out of court, we might salvage our reputations even if you decide to leave me. Let's talk settlement." The mention of a settlement was jarring to Elisa, who had once believed in fairy tale romance with this man. Now their marriage was reduced to negotiations and hush-money deals. "I don't know yet," she said, fighting a surge of tears. "I need space and time. I won't be blackmailed into hiding the truth just because your public image is at stake." Richard reached for her hand, but she withdrew. "Elisa, please don't." Her eyes flashed. "I'll be in touch through my lawyer." And with that, she stood and left him sitting there, haunted by the gravity of his betrayal. By midweek, letters had been exchanged between Hannah Schwartz's firm and Richard's newly hired counsel, a man named Jonathan Reese, known for representing high-profile CEOs through messy divorces. Reese proposed a discreet settlement to avoid public litigation, suggesting that Elisa sign an NDA in exchange for a hefty sum. But Hannah's approach, shaped by Elisa's heartbreak and sense of betrayal, was to push for transparency and a fair division of assets rather than hush money. Meanwhile, the media smelled blood. Small blurbs about a Bay Area power couple's rumored split popped up in local gossip blogs. Social media was ablaze with speculation about who the unconfirmed other woman might be. Elisa considered giving a statement, but Hannah advised caution. "Don't feed the beast," she said. "Focus on securing what's best for you." Then came a new card on the table. Charlotte, Elisa's best friend, discovered that Richard might be transferring funds overseas. During her PR consulting gigs, Charlotte often heard rumors floating around about clients shifting assets to offshore accounts. She recognized that if Richard was panicking, he might be attempting to shield his money from a potential settlement. Alarmed, Charlotte relayed this to Elisa, who immediately informed Hannah. Hannah's firm launched an investigation. Sure enough, suspicious wire transfers indicated that Richard was funneling significant sums into an account in the Cayman Islands. The sting of betrayal flared yet again. Richard wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was also a cunning adversary who intended to keep as much of his fortune out of Elisa's reach as possible. With this revelation, Elisa's sense of righteous indignation soared. Any lingering doubt about whether to try reconciling disappeared. She wanted accountability, not compromise. With Hannah's guidance, they filed a motion to freeze certain assets pending divorce proceedings. The legal battle lines were drawn. As the situation escalated, Elisa realized that the final confrontation was more than emotional. It was financial, social, and potentially explosive. It was late on a Tuesday when Elisa received an unexpected email from an unfamiliar address, Heather Carlson. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." A shiver coursed through Elisa's spine as she clicked it open. The message was short, stilted, and riddled with subtext. "Elisa, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I had no idea how serious things were between you and Richard. He told me you were practically separated and only living under the same roof for convenience. I feel terrible for the hurt I've caused. I never wanted to be the other woman. If you ever want to talk, my number is below." Heather Elisa read the message multiple times, torn between fury and a strange pang of curiosity. She suspected Heather's claims about not knowing the truth. Yet there was a ring of plausibility. Richard was manipulative enough to spin any narrative that served him. Another possibility flashed through her mind. Perhaps Heather was trying to cover her tracks before litigation or a media scandal implicated her. She wondered if replying could yield valuable insight. After all, knowledge was power in a legal war. In the end, Elisa decided to respond with a brief note. "Heather, I appreciate your message. My lawyers are currently handling everything, and I can't discuss details. Elisa Davenport." She clicked send, her stomach twisting with the bitter reality that her life had turned into a labyrinth of legal documents and electronic confessions. Later, she paced her opulent bedroom, the same one she had shared with Richard for years, feeling like a ghost in her own life. Through it all, a single thought anchored her. She wouldn't let his lies define her future. She would find a way to emerge stronger. A week later, Elisa's mother, Arianna Bellini, returned from Italy. The regal older woman came straight to Elisa's home, eyes brimming with concern. Over espresso in the sunlit kitchen, Elisa recounted the entire saga, the suspicious email, the hotel confrontation, the potential divorce. Arianna listened, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I never imagined Richard would do such a thing," Arianna murmured. "He seemed the ideal husband." Elisa nodded, swallowing a painful lump. "We all did." To Elisa's surprise, her mother then offered a piece of pragmatic wisdom. "Men who cheat rarely have one reason, they do it because they can. Now the question is, how will you let this shape your future? If it were me, I'd never remain in a marriage where loyalty was broken so brazenly." The bluntness made Elisa flinch. Yet it struck a chord of truth. She had been wrestling with the thought of giving Richard a second chance, but each new piece of evidence, his attempt to hide assets, his manipulative excuses, revealed a man she barely recognized. "I can't see a path forward with him," she finally admitted. Arianna reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Then don't let him break you. Fight for what you deserve." That same day, Elisa's father, though long divorced from Arianna, called to express his support. Even Richard's parents, with whom Elisa had always been cordial, reached out to apologize on their son's behalf. They urged her to keep the divorce quiet to avoid a scandal. The pleas made Elisa's skin crawl. Why was preserving Richard's reputation suddenly her burden? She politely but firmly told them she would do what was right for her. Tensions escalated after word leaked that Elisa's lawyers had filed to freeze Richard's accessible accounts. Furious, he drove to the Carmel house one evening, pounding on the door. Elisa warily let him in, refusing to appear intimidated in her own home. "Why the hell are you trying to block my money?" he demanded, cheeks flushed. "Our money. I built these businesses before I even met you." "That might be true," she replied, arms folded. "But I supported your endeavors, brought contacts to your business expansions, and we built a life together. You don't get to cut me out just because you decided to have an affair." Richard paced the entryway, raking his hand through his hair in frustration. "This is madness. You're tearing everything apart. Think of how this will look if it goes to court." She stared at him, incredulous. "Are you truly worried about appearances? You did that to yourself the moment you booked a romantic suite. Don't make me the villain here." He paused, chest heaving. "You really want to drag this out in public? Why not settle? I'll give you a lump sum, a generous one, and you can walk away. No messy trial, no media circus. We both move on." A flicker of temptation crossed Elisa's mind. Could she simply accept a large settlement, vanish from his life, and start anew? But then she remembered how humiliating it had felt to discover his betrayal, and how sneaky he'd been about his offshore accounts. She realized that taking hush money would let him off easy free to spin the narrative however he wished. "No," she said, voice unwavering. "I want a fair settlement, not a bribe. We go through the legal process." Richard growled in frustration, stepping back. "Fine, have it your way. But don't expect me to roll over." With that, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. His departure echoed through the silent foyer, each reverberation reminding Elisa that this war was far from over. Despite the looming legal battle, Elisa discovered an unexpected source of strength: her philanthropic work. She immersed herself in planning a high-profile charity gala to raise funds for the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital at Stanford. The event scheduled for the following month would feature performances by local artists, an auction of fine wines donated in part by the Bellini family estate, and a keynote speech by a renowned pediatric surgeon. Each day she coordinated with caterers, decorators, and media teams, forging ahead with a renewed sense of purpose. For years her identity had been Mrs. Davenport, but now she embraced being simply Elisa Bellini, a woman determined to make a positive impact despite personal turmoil. Her friend Charlotte encouraged her to be visible in the public eye. "It'll reinforce that you're doing meaningful work and not cowering in shame," she said. Elisa agreed wholeheartedly. She even posted glimpses of her gala preparation on social media, receiving an outpouring of support from friends and acquaintances alike. The positivity was a balm to her wounded ego. One evening after a long day of event planning, Hannah Schwartz called with an update. "We've got enough evidence of Richard's financial maneuvers to present a strong case for a favorable division of assets," Hannah explained. "He'll likely try to fight it, but the court will see the evidence. Are you ready to proceed?" "Yes," Elisa answered, feeling a surge of resolution. "I am." A few weeks later, the first official step in the legal process arrived: mediation. Conducted in a neutral office in downtown San Francisco, the session aimed to see if the two parties could reach an agreement without going to trial. Elisa arrived with Hannah and another associate while Richard showed up with Jonathan Reese. Outside the conference room, they waited tensely until the mediator, a seasoned retired judge, beckoned them in. The session began with each lawyer presenting their arguments. Hannah outlined Elisa's contributions to the marriage, her role in building social capital for Richard's enterprises, and the evidence of Richard's affair. Reese countered that the affair was irrelevant to the financial settlement, that prenups typically protected pre-existing assets, and that Richard's offshoring was a strategic business move, not an attempt to hide marital funds. After hours of back and forth, the atmosphere grew toxic. Richard refused to concede certain properties, including a vineyard home in Napa, that Elisa treasured. Hannah demanded a more substantial spousal support arrangement, given Elisa's halting her own career pursuits to support Richard. Tensions flared, culminating in an outburst where Richard accused Elisa of orchestrating a public stunt at the Ritz-Carlton. The mediator tried to maintain calm, but it was apparent that neither side was ready to compromise. By late afternoon, mediation ended inconclusively. Elisa left feeling mentally drained and emotionally battered. Yet, as she observed Richard's sullen glare on her way out, she reminded herself this was the price of standing up for her dignity and future. In the aftermath of failed mediation, Elisa worried about an impending trial. But Hannah presented a new angle: the effect of negative publicity on Richard's businesses if the affair and offshore transfers became public record. "He might claim not to care, but his investors do," Hannah noted. "They'll question his stability and ethics." Sure enough, only days after the disastrous mediation, Jonathan Reese reached out with renewed settlement talks. He hinted that Richard wanted to avoid airing dirty laundry in court. Elisa smelled fear. The negotiations resumed in a more informal capacity: phone calls, email exchanges, and third-party proposals. Ultimately, Richard made a significant concession. He would grant Elisa partial ownership of 2 profitable restaurants, plus a hefty monthly spousal support for 5 years, on top of a one-time lump sum. In exchange, he asked for a confidentiality clause preventing Elisa from publicly discussing the affair in detail. At first, Elisa bristled at the idea of keeping quiet, but Hannah pointed out that discussing the affair might bring short-term satisfaction, but also indefinite entanglement with tabloids. By accepting this settlement, you achieve financial security and the freedom to move on, Hannah reasoned. Elisa took the weekend to mull it over. In her reflection, she realized that continuing a vengeful fight could devour years of her life. Did she really want to remain tethered to Richard battling in court just to publicly expose him? Ultimately, she valued her peace more. Under Hannah's guidance, Elisa and Richard signed a divorce settlement agreement that incorporated the new financial terms. The confidentiality clause was specific, limiting Elisa from sharing or selling her story to tabloids, but it didn't muzzle her from discussing the affair with family or close friends in private. It was a compromise she found bearable. She had no desire to become a media spectacle anyway. The day the papers were finalized, Elisa felt a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a strange sense of loss for the dream she had once nurtured. Despite everything, Richard had been an important part of her life for years. Now they were concluding that chapter in a swirl of heartbreak and legal formality. The final meeting took place in Hannah's office. Richard sat at one end of the conference table, Elisa at the other. Their signatures formalized the end of their marriage. No tears were shed. No dramatic confessions. Just a quiet acceptance that they were now on separate paths. "I'm sorry," Richard muttered, barely meeting her eyes before he left with Jonathan Reese. She didn't respond. What words were there left to say? In the weeks following, Elisa navigated her new normal. She decided to move out of the Carmel house, which felt haunted by memories, and purchased a smaller but charming villa closer to her beloved Napa Valley. To her surprise, the money from the settlement combined with her renewed sense of purpose fueled an exciting new project. She planned to open a boutique vineyard with a focus on eco-friendly wine production, a nod to her father's heritage and her own philanthropic passion for sustainability. She also recognized the need for emotional healing. A few therapy sessions gave her tools to process betrayal and rediscover self-worth. Through it all, Charlotte remained a steadfast confidant, sometimes dragging Elisa out to social gatherings to laugh, dance, and embrace life again. The charity gala she had organized earlier finally took place, serving as a triumphant public reemergence. Wearing a simple yet elegant gown, Elisa delivered a moving speech about resilience in adversity, careful never to mention her personal fiasco, but clearly drawing from it. The audience responded with a standing ovation. In that shining moment, she felt the weight of the past lighten just a bit. One afternoon, while overseeing renovations at her soon-to-launch vineyard, Elisa received a voicemail from Heather Carlson. The message was, "Timid Elisa. I just wanted to say that I ended things with Richard. I realized he lied to both of us. If you ever need any statement from me, I'm willing to help. I owe you that." Surprised, Elisa debated whether to return the call. Ultimately, she decided to send a simple text. "I appreciate your willingness, but it's settled. I'm moving on. Good luck to you, Heather." It felt final, a gentle closing of the door on that entire humiliating saga. As months passed, rumors about the Davenport divorce fizzled. Society's attention span was brief, and new scandals replaced old ones. Elisa's philanthropic work grew more robust, and she took joy in launching her eco-friendly vineyard, partnering with local farms, and hosting intimate wine tastings. Each day she found a new reason to appreciate her autonomy. No more anxious nights waiting for Richard to come home. No more second-guessing unexplained phone calls. She also allowed herself to explore the possibility of love again, though she proceeded with caution. Occasionally she met intriguing individuals at upscale charity galas or through mutual friends. None had ignited her passions yet, but for the first time in a while, she felt the flicker of hope that her heart might heal and open again. During a charity function in Los Angeles, Elisa crossed paths with Hannah Schwartz outside the formal setting of the law office. Over drinks at the bar, they chatted about life post-divorce. Hannah confessed that she found Elisa's resilience inspiring. "Most of my clients fall apart," Hannah said, swirling her martini. "You've turned this tragedy into a new beginning." Elisa smiled warmly. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance and your legal brilliance." She toasted the attorney with her wine glass. That night they forged a bond beyond the client-lawyer dynamic, blossoming into a genuine friendship. It felt symbolic of Elisa's transformation, where once she was powerless, leaning on others to defend her. Now she could stand on her own 2 feet, forging new alliances by choice rather than necessity. At the new vineyard, aptly named Bellini Winds, Elisa found solace walking among rows of young vines swaying in the coastal breeze. Often she reflected on the day she discovered that incriminating email and how it had catapulted her life into chaos. She'd lost the marriage she once treasured, but in the process she discovered a strength and independence she never knew she had. Sometimes she still felt pangs of sorrow or anger, especially when glimpses of Richard's success popped up in business magazines. Yet each day that passed, she inched closer to forgiving herself for trusting him, and forgiving him if not for his sake, then for her own peace of mind. Ironically, about a year after their divorce was finalized, rumors emerged that one of Richard's major restaurant chains was faltering. Investors were withdrawing, citing concerns over management. Some speculated that the negative publicity from his affair had tarnished his brand. Others claimed he'd overextended finances trying to juggle too many acquisitions at once. Regardless, it was a swift decline. Elisa caught wind of this through mutual acquaintances and surprisingly felt no schadenfreude. The man had hurt her deeply. Yes, but she had moved beyond the need to revel in his failures. Instead, she counted her blessings. She had a new, more genuine path. Late one afternoon, as Elisa strolled through the tasting room at Bellini Winds, she spotted a photograph on the wall, a candid shot of her raising a glass with friends at a charity event. She realized how much she'd changed since that moment. Gone was the naive trust, replaced by a more discerning heart. Yet she was still capable of compassion, kindness, and a flair for the dramatic, just more cautious about whom she bestowed those qualities upon. She gazed at the glass in her hand, swirling the deep red wine. To second chances, she murmured, smiling softly. For in every heartbreak there lies the seed of a new beginning. The final loose ends of the divorce wrapped up with minimal fuss. Hannah confirmed that Richard had fully complied with the financial terms and that all confidentiality requirements were in place. Elisa's life felt more stable than it had in years. One morning, as she surveyed the vineyard from her porch, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had endured betrayal, heartbreak, and the scorn of public whispers. Yet she'd emerged not as a victim, but as a self-reliant woman steering her destiny. The cyclical nature of the vines, each season bringing a new phase of growth, mirrored her personal renewal. Charlotte dropped by for a weekend stay, her flamboyant personality filling the villa with laughter. Over a dinner of farm-fresh vegetables and local cheeses, they reminisced about the day Elisa had first discovered Richard's incriminating email. Charlotte teased, "Who knew that single email would lead to you owning your own vineyard?" Elisa laughed, tears of mirth gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Life is funny like that," she agreed. "Sometimes the worst moment can set off a chain reaction leading to something unexpectedly beautiful." Bellini Winds officially opened for visitors in a grand ceremony that combined wine-tasting, music, and philanthropic fundraising. Attendees praised the warm ambiance and the high-quality wines, as well as Elisa's personal story of perseverance. Though she was careful not to exploit her divorce drama, it was undeniable that the narrative of her overcoming adversity resonated with many. By the end of the evening, she had forged new business connections and raised substantial funds for a local children's hospital. It was then that she realized her new reality. She was no longer the wife of a wealthy venture capitalist, but a force in her own right. And it felt exhilarating. In the hush of a tranquil night after the last car of gala guests rolled down the gravel driveway, Elisa stood under a canopy of stars, savoring the crisp night air and the lingering taste of wine on her lips. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the moment she'd opened that damned email, her world had turned upside down. She'd faced deceit, heartbreak, legal warfare, and the loss of a life she once clung to. Yet through the storm she discovered what it meant to own her power, to stand tall in the face of betrayal, and carve out a future that was unequivocally hers. Somewhere in a penthouse or an office, Richard was likely licking his wounds, regret gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. Heather Carlson had faded into the backdrop, a passing footnote in Elisa's story. And Elisa, she was living a new life, shaped by resilience and illuminated by hope. As she took one final glance at the rolling vineyards, she whispered a silent promise to herself. Never again would she settle for anything less than respect, devotion, and honesty. Thus ended one chapter of her life, and began another radiant with possibility. Elisa Davenport's journey reminds us that even the darkest moments can spark transformative change. From discovering her husband's affair to orchestrating a poised confrontation and navigating a stormy legal battle, She emerged as a self-made, empowered individual, with her boutique vineyard thriving, her philanthropic work admired, and her future wide open. Elisa proves that the greatest revenge isn't about retaliation. It's about rebuilding a life on your own terms. If this story moved you, inspired you, or even left you wanting more, please show your support. Like this video to let us know you enjoyed the tale. Share it with friends who might need a dose of empowerment in their own lives. And subscribe to this channel for more gripping, dramatic, and ultimately uplifting stories. Together, let's keep spreading the message that life's biggest betrayals can become our greatest turning points. Thank you for watching, and remember, you hold the power to redefine your own destiny.